Hi, I'm David from Real-Time CRM, and I want to explore the question with you: what is a sales pipeline and why do you need one? A sales pipeline is a visual representation of all the stages in your sales process and where each of your potential deals is on this predetermined path. Oftentimes, a salesperson will get lost in activities like sending emails and making calls without the bird's eye view which the sales pipeline gives. For example, with a sales pipeline, you can see if your sales team will hit their sales quotas for the month or for any given period. It makes it easier to make strategic decisions and focus on deals that will grow your bottom line. A study by the Harvard Business Review showed that there was an 18% difference in revenue growth between companies that had a formal sales process and companies that didn't. So it makes sense to build and take advantage of a formal sales pipeline. We know that the sales pipeline is based on your sales process, and your sales process should match the buyer's journey of your ideal customer. In B2B selling, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Different businesses require more or less time to evaluate proposals, and it's up to you to figure out the best sales process to help them make a decision. Having said that, there are some general features, good practices that every great sales pipeline has, and we'll take a look through these. This will give you a starting place to build your own sales pipeline. So first of all, let's look at prospecting. Before you do anything, you have to find some prospects to sell to. You can't sell to everyone, so you have to figure out who would benefit from what you're selling. You do this by creating an ideal customer profile, an ICP. A good place to start is looking at the companies you've sold to before. What do they have in common? You should also look at what problem or problems your product or service solves, and then go out and find people with those problems. The common way to engage them is through cold calls and cold emails, or meeting them at networking events. Prospecting is a one-to-one approach, but you can also do lead generation. This is a one-to-many approach, where you've got your ICP, then you figure out where your ideal customers hang out and how they talk. You then tailor your marketing to attract them. This can be through social media posts, your website, and email campaigns. Whatever approach you're taking, the purpose is the same: find people who will buy what you're selling. The second stage is qualification. This is the great filter. There's no point wasting your time with people who will never buy from you, so the qualification stage is absolutely critical. Here you ask the questions that will tell you whether they are a good fit for your offering or not. Fundamentally, you need to find out at least these things. Firstly, do they have the budget to buy from you? Secondly, are they the decision maker who has the authority to say yes to the deal? Next, does your product or service meet a need that they have? And lastly, what is the timeline for implementing a solution? If, as you ask these questions, you keep getting negative answers, then you've not wasted your time, you know they're not a right fit for you, and your offering can't help them, so you can move on and focus on prospects who you can help. Qualifying a lead isn't too difficult. You ask questions to get the background on the prospect's company, and then ask questions to get the detail around the problems that they face. If you can't see your product being used in solving their problem, and the background information you get doesn't fit your ideal customer profile, then you can walk away without taking a hit on a huge investment of time. That's good for you and good for the prospect. The third step is evaluation. At this stage, your sales team have already qualified the prospect, and the prospect are aware of what you are offering. They are now going to look in depth at your product, and the prospect will probably compare you with some alternatives. During this stage, you'll probably want to do some demonstrations of your product and create case studies for the prospect. You might even want to create multiple options for them to consider. This will of course depend on what you found out during the qualifying stage. Maybe they don't need all the bells and whistles and they don't have all the budget of your top tier service, but that doesn't mean you can't turn them into a customer. The fourth stage is the decision. At this stage, the prospect will make a decision on whether to become your customer or not. It isn't yet a done deal, as they could still change their minds and go with an alternative. There are other things to consider, like other stakeholders who need to greenlight the decision, as well as seeing if there are other projects that might take priority. That can also delay things. A good salesperson will figure out what needs to be done to get the deal over the finish line. Don't make the mistake of thinking your work is done quite yet. The fifth step is closing. Any prospect who enters this stage are now paying customers. They've signed on the dotted line and you've won the deal. Great news. But now the task of actually delivering on your promises begins. Okay, so having looked at those stages, what you may have noticed is that the further down the pipeline you go, the greater chance that you have of winning the deal. If you're at the closing stage, there's probably a high likelihood of turning them into a customer, as opposed to an unqualified lead right at the top of the sales pipeline. Let's now take a deeper look at this by comparing a sales funnel to a sales pipeline. A sales pipeline measures what a seller does during the sales process. The sales funnel measures the conversion rate as you go through your sales process. The fundamental difference between the two is that the sales pipeline is a process game where you look at the steps to close a deal, whereas the sales funnel, on the other hand, is a numbers game where you measure how many prospects go through each stage. The sales funnel is V-shaped, as it assumes the number of prospects will drop off as you move through it. Therefore, if you know what your conversion rates are, then you can work backwards and figure out how big your sales pipeline needs to be to meet your sales quota. The sales funnel, therefore, seems pretty useful, but there's a catch. It creates an unrealistic expectation. Let's say you contact 300 leads, and you'll then have an expectation to close 50 of them based on your conversion rates. The assumption that a set percentage of deals will drop out of the pipeline may not always hold. It's often a better strategy to work on fewer, higher quality deals rather than trying to hit numbers and assuming that the percentages will hold. Remember, your qualified prospects are the ones that matter. If you've got 1,000 leads that are a poor fit, then your assumptions will fall apart. Having a focus on process and making sure that you have a solid, ideal customer profile when you're doing your research of your prospects will pay dividends in the long run. So let's have a look at the sales pipeline and the sales forecast in comparison. The sales pipeline and the sales forecast are not the same thing. They tell you different things. The sales pipeline tells you what the value of all your deals are and where they sit in the sales process. The sales forecast, on the other hand, tells you how likely you are to close your deal in a given period. This means that you can see how close you are to hitting your targets, and if you're unlikely to hit them, then you need to redouble your efforts. The type of opportunities that your business generates will give you an idea of how to forecast accurately. If you have a high volume of low value deals, then you can predict the forecast with your sales pipeline metrics. However, if your deals are more complex, then you'll have to assess each one in order to get a more accurate prediction of what you're likely to close in your next quarter, for example. Okay, so let me give you some tips for effective sales pipeline management. Number one, look to add new deals and update your sales pipeline regularly. Your sales pipeline is only as useful as the effort you put into it. You want to keep adding new deals as attrition reduces the number of deals in your pipeline. And an up-to-date pipeline allows you to forecast more accurately whether you'll need quarterly targets and so take proactive action to do so. If your sales pipeline is inaccurate, it can't help you make the right decisions. Number two, have a standardized follow-up procedure. Make it easy for your sales rep to do their job. You don't want your leads to go cold, so have a playbook that they can follow to push them down the sales pipeline. For example, here we can assign tasks to other team members so that they don't miss a step, and have your quote template generated in a few clicks instead of having to create from scratch for each new deal. It just reduces friction and frees things up. Number three, keep track of your sales pipeline metrics. By keeping track of your metrics, you can assess how you're doing and whether any changes you've made have improved things. The basic metrics that you should know are as follows. Number 1, the number of deals in your pipeline. Number 2, the average size of the deals in your pipeline. Number 3, the average percent of deals that you win, otherwise known as the close rate. And lastly, the average lifetime of a deal before it closes, the sales velocity. Based on your metrics, you should get an idea of what an opportunity with a high likelihood of being won looks like, and that should enable you to identify the most promising leads. This means that you make the most effective use of your time and focus your efforts where they'll get the highest return. Number 4, review your sales pipeline regularly. Review your pipeline to see where its weaknesses are and then readjust. Are you accurately reflecting the buyer's journey? When you're moving your deals from one stage to the next, it's important to cite what factors help you advance the deal so that you can focus on performing those activities and continue to keep the deals flowing. It could be sending a written proposal, identifying stakeholders, or getting a budget approved. There's an event at each stage that moves the deal along. Make sure you know what it is and it's reflected in your sales process. Obviously, using a CRM will make this much easier. Number 5, remove dead leads from your sales pipeline. One of the biggest mistakes in sales pipeline management is to not clear out your pipeline. If a prospect has been sitting at the negotiation stage for months and there's been no movement, then it should be removed. You can try and resurrect it by writing a breakup email, but if that doesn't work, then get it out your pipeline. The reason is that because it throws the accuracy of your sales forecast out. It'll create a gap between your expectations and reality, and the more dead leads you have, the worse that this will be. For example, let's say you have a deal worth $1,000 and it's sitting in the negotiation where you usually have a 75% chance of closing. That means the weighted value of the deal is $750, which means you can expect this $750 in potential revenue in the quarterly sales forecast. But this isn't true. There's been no activity and your sales forecast is off by $750. Every stale deal in your pipeline will muddy the waters and make your sales pipeline seem healthier than it really is. It'll also mean you won't really know if you're going to hit your sales quota or not. Calculating the ideal size of your sales pipeline. There are 2 things you need to be able to figure out how big your sales pipeline should be to meet your targets. You need to know your close rate and your sales quota. The close rate is pretty simple. It's just the percentage of deals won over a given period of time. So let's say you have $100,000 in total deals over a year, of which your rep wins $40,000. That means their annual close rate was 40%. Let's assume that their annual quota is now $80,000. We know that their close rate is 40%, so to figure out how big their sales pipeline needs to be, you need to divide their annual quota by the annual close rate, which in this case should give you a figure of $200,000. The sales quota divided by the close rate gives the perfect pipeline size. This formula gives you a rough idea of the targets your sales team should be hitting. Obviously, as time goes on, the ideal size of their pipeline might shrink as they improve their close rates and other individual factors will apply, but this gives you a general rule of thumb to get started. I hope that overview of what a sales pipeline is and why it's important for you has been helpful. Subscribe for other sales related videos and good luck in your business.